The alarm bells rang through the crystal halls of the Zephyrian Command Center. Admiral Kethvar rushed down the glowing corridors, his four arms moving quickly as he tried to process the reports flooding in from across the galaxy. Each message brought worse news than the last. The war room was chaos when he arrived. Dozens of his officers stood around the main display table, their insect-like faces showing fear and desperation. The holographic map of the galaxy glowed above them, but now most of it was covered in angry red zones. Red meant death. Red meant the Vorthic Collective had been there. "Report," Kethvar ordered. Though he already knew it would be bad news. Commander Vexmore stepped forward, her young face pale with exhaustion. She had been monitoring the deep space sensors for 3 days straight, watching as their allies fell one by one. "Admiral, we've lost contact with the Hegemony's 4th Fleet. That's 12 more star systems gone dark in the past cycle." The Admiral's compound eyes focused on the tactical display. Each red zone represented billions of dead. The Vorthic didn't just conquer worlds, they consumed them completely. Every living thing, every plant, every microbe was harvested to fuel their endless expansion. "What about the Kron Empire?" "They promised reinforcements," Kethvar asked, though he already feared the answer. "Sir, the Kron Empire fell yesterday. Their home world went silent 6 hours ago. Intelligence suggests the entire Kron military was destroyed in a single battle." Vexmore's voice cracked as she delivered the news. The room fell quiet except for the soft humming of the crystal walls. The Kron Empire had been the strongest military force in the galaxy. Their warrior culture had produced soldiers who lived only for battle. If they couldn't stop the Vorthic, who could? Council Prime Lyeth Nal entered the war room with heavy steps. Her ancient carapace, once brilliant blue-green, had dulled to a sickly gray over the past months. The stress of commanding a losing war was killing her slowly. "Honored members," she began, addressing the assembled officers, "I have called you here to discuss our final options. Our conventional forces have failed. Every strategy we have tried has been useless against the collective." She activated the main display, showing the current state of the galaxy. The red zones had spread like a disease, consuming everything in their path. Mathematical projections showed their inevitable advance toward the Zephyrian core worlds. At current rates of expansion, the Vorthic will reach our home systems in less than 6 months. Our evacuation fleets can save perhaps 10% of our population. The rest. She didn't need to finish the sentence. A younger officer raised his hand. "What about the defense platforms around Zephyr Prime? Surely they can hold the enemy long enough for more evacuations." Kethvar studied the tactical data with growing despair. The defense platforms were designed to fight conventional fleets. The Vorthic don't use normal ships or weapons. Their vessels are alive, growing stronger with every world they consume. Our platforms would delay them by perhaps a few days at most. The reality of their situation settled over the room like a heavy blanket. The Zephyrian hegemony had ruled peacefully for thousands of years. They were diplomats and scientists, not warriors. When faced with an enemy that understood only consumption and expansion, their refined culture meant nothing. "There is one possibility," came a voice from the doorway. Everyone turned to see Siltith, the ancient keeper of archives. She was old even by Zephyrian standards, her carapace scarred by centuries of study in the deep vaults. In her arms, she carried a crystalline data core that pulsed with forbidden knowledge. "Keeper Siltith," Council Prime Lyeth Nal said with surprise, "the sealed archives are restricted during wartime." "These are not normal times," the old keeper replied. "The situation requires extreme measures." She placed the data core on the display table, and immediately the room filled with ancient symbols and mathematical formulas. The assembled officers stared at the alien script with confusion. The language was old, predating their current civilization by millennia. Only a few scholars could still read the ancient texts. What does it say? Kethvar asked. Siltef's eyes reflected the amber glow of the data core as she began to translate. These are the summoning protocols from the old wars. Instructions for calling upon warriors from distant dimensions when all hope is lost. Room erupted in whispers. Interdimensional summoning was theoretical at best, forbidden at worst. The energy requirements alone would be enormous. It's impossible, Commander Vexmore protested. The power needed for such a summoning would require our entire remaining fleet. We'd be defenseless if it failed. We're already defenseless, Siltith replied calmly. The protocols describe a species called humans from a dimension parallel to our own. According to the texts, they are the apex predators of their world. She activated another section of the data core, revealing disturbing biological information about this mysterious species. They evolved as persistence hunters, chasing their prey across vast distances until exhaustion killed them. Their world produced no other intelligent species because these humans were too efficient at survival. Admiral Kethvar studied the alien anatomy charts with growing unease. The humans appeared to be bipedal mammals, similar to several species in their galaxy, but with subtle differences that suggested a predatory nature. What makes them so dangerous? He asked. Silteth's compound eyes reflected the data as she continued reading. They are the only known species that developed warfare as both an art and a science. Their recreational activities simulate combat and competition. Even their children play games that teach tactical thinking and aggression. The mathematical formulas showed the complexity of the summoning ritual. It would require precise calculations and the combined power output of their remaining fleet. If they attempted it, there would be no energy left for conventional defense. The texts contain a warning, Siltith continued. These humans are described as necessary but dangerous allies. They wage war without the moral constraints that limit civilized species. The ancient writers feared what might happen if such beings were given advanced technology. Council Prime Liv and Now weighed their options. Continue fighting a war they couldn't win, or summon warriors who might be as dangerous as the enemy they faced. Neither choice offered much hope. How many humans would this summoning bring? She asked. The protocols are designed to summon small groups, perhaps a ship's crew or military unit. The theory suggests that taking too many individuals from their dimension could cause dangerous instabilities. Commander Vexmore ran quick calculations on her personal display. A single ship's crew against the entire Vorthic collective? Even if these humans are as dangerous as the texts claim, the numbers don't work. But Admiral Kethvar was thinking differently. His years of military experience had taught him that sometimes quantity wasn't everything. The Vorthic are predictable because they're a hive mind. They use the same tactics because they think the same way. But if these humans are truly different... He trailed off, studying the tactical data with new eyes. Every species that had fought the Vorthic had tried to match their numbers and technology. None had tried something completely unexpected. We're not summoning them to fight the entire collective, he realized. We're summoning them to teach us how to fight differently. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. They weren't looking for saviors, they were looking for teachers who could show them new ways to wage war. Council Prime Liath Now made the decision that would change both civilizations forever. Prepare the summoning array. Begin evacuating non-essential personnel from the fleet. If we're going to gamble everything on this desperate plan, we'll do it properly. As the orders went out across the remaining Zephyrian forces, Siltith continued studying the ancient protocols. The warnings in the text were clear. The humans were dangerous not just to their enemies, but to anyone who worked with them. They would bring new ways of thinking that could never be unlearned. But as another report came in of 3 more star systems falling to the Vorthak advance, the choice became simple. They could die as a civilized species following their principles, or they could survive by learning from the galaxy's most dangerous predators. The preparation began immediately, and across space, reality itself would soon bend to bring together two species who had never met but whose fates were now inseparably linked. Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison was drinking his morning coffee in the mess hall of the UE's Defiance when the universe twisted around him like a broken mirror. One second he was looking at his duty roster for the day, the next he was standing in what looked like a massive cathedral made of living crystal dot. The coffee mug fell from his hands and shattered on the glowing floor. Around him, the familiar gray walls of the ship had been replaced by towering crystal structures that pulsed with soft blue light. The air tasted different, thinner somehow, with a metallic tang that made his nose wrinkle. What the hell? Chief Engineer Lisa Bennett appeared beside him, her tool belt scattered across the strange floor as she stumbled forward. Her eyes were wide with confusion as she took in their surroundings. "Jake, please tell me this is some kind of drill." More members of the crew began materializing around them. Captain Ryan Cole appeared with his hand already reaching for his sidearm, his military training kicking in automatically. Behind him came Dr. Alex Turner from the medical bay, still holding a data pad from his morning research. The crystal chamber was enormous, easily the size of a football stadium. The ceiling arched high above them, covered in symbols that seemed to shift and change when they weren't looking directly at them. But what really caught their attention were the beings standing around them. They looked like giant insects that had learned to walk upright. Each one stood about 7 feet tall, with 4 arms ending in delicate manipulator hands. Their faces were covered by compound eyes that reflected the crystal light like prisms. Their bodies were covered in what looked like natural armor plating, in shades of blue and green. "Holy shit," whispered Sergeant Maria Valdez as she appeared with the rest of the security team. Her hand was already on her weapon, but she didn't draw it. Years of combat experience had taught her to assess a situation before acting. One of the alien beings stepped forward, holding what looked like a small device. When it spoke, the device translated its words into English, though the accent was strange and mechanical. "Greetings, warriors of Earth. I am Admiral Kethvar of the Zephyrian Hegemony. We have used ancient protocols to summon you to our dimension in our time of greatest need." Captain Cole stepped forward, his officer training taking over despite the impossible situation. "Admiral, I'm Captain Ryan Cole of the United Earthship Defiance. I'm going to need an explanation of what just happened and where we are." The alien admiral gestured with all 4 of his arms toward a series of holographic displays that flickered to life around the chamber. The images showed star maps covered in red zones that seemed to pulse with malevolent energy. "You are in our command center on Zephyr Prime, approximately 50,000 light years from your home galaxy. We have brought you here because our civilization faces complete extinction." Dr. Turner approached one of the displays, his scientific curiosity overcoming his fear. The star map showed a galaxy similar to the Milky Way, but with vast sections marked in red. "These red areas, what do they represent?" A younger alien, introduced as Commander Vex Moore, activated the display controls. "Those are systems that have been consumed by the Vorthek Collective. They are a species that devours entire worlds to fuel their expansion." The display zoomed in on one of the red zones, showing what looked like mechanical ships with organic components. The vessels were grotesque combinations of metal and flesh, pulsing with veins that carried unknown fluids through their hulls. "They're not just conquerors," Admiral Kethvar explained. "They consume all biological matter on every world they encounter. The biomass is used to create more ships, more soldiers, more weapons. Every world they take makes them stronger." "Chief." Bennett studied the alien technology displays with professional interest. "How many ships are we talking about?" Current estimates place their fleet strength at over 50,000 vessels, Commander Vexmore replied. They have consumed the populations of over 200 worlds in the past 3 years. The human crew exchanged glances. The entire Earth Defense Force had maybe 300 ships, most of them designed for patrol duty rather than fleet combat. The scale of the threat was beyond anything they had ever imagined. Why us? Captain Cole asked the question they were all thinking. What makes you think a single human ship can help against odds like that? An ancient alien entered the chamber, moving slowly with the weight of great age. This was Siltith, the Keeper of Archives. She approached the humans with obvious curiosity, studying them like specimens in a laboratory. According to our ancient records, your species is unique in this part of the universe. You evolved as persistence hunters, predators who chase their prey to exhaustion across vast distances. Your world produced no other sapient species, because you were too efficient at survival. Sergeant Valdez laughed grimly. Lady, I hate to break it to you, but we're not exactly the apex predators you're looking for. We're just regular military personnel trying to keep our colonies safe. But Dr. Turner was studying the biological data that the aliens had compiled about humanity. Actually, she's not wrong about our evolutionary history. Humans did evolve as endurance hunters. We're one of the few species that can run for hours without stopping. Siltith activated another display, showing historical data about human warfare. Your species has been in a state of almost constant conflict for your entire recorded history. You have developed warfare into both an art and a science. Even your recreational activities simulate combat and competition. The display showed everything from ancient battles to modern military exercises. The aliens had somehow gathered extensive data about human civilization, including details that made the crew uncomfortable. How do you know so much about us? Captain Cole demanded. The summoning protocols required detailed biological and psychological profiles of the target species. Admiral Kethvar explained. We have been monitoring your dimension for some time, waiting for the right moment to make contact. Commander. Vexmore brought up new displays showing recent battle recordings from the war against the Vorthek. Every species that has fought them has tried to match their numbers and technology. The Kron Empire, the Aqualian Federation, the Hegemony Alliance, all have fallen using conventional military tactics. The recording showed massive fleet battles where the Allied forces were systematically overwhelmed by Vorthek swarm tactics. The enemy ships moved with perfect coordination, never making mistakes, never showing individual initiative. They're a hive mind, Dr. Turner observed, studying the battle patterns. Perfect coordination, but no adaptability. They use the same tactics because they literally can't think of alternatives. Chief Bennett had been examining the technical specifications of both sides' equipment. Your weapons and ships are more advanced than ours, but you're fighting them like a traditional war. Naval formations, direct confrontations, trying to hold territory. How else would one conduct warfare? Admiral Kethvar asked, genuinely confused. Sergeant Valdez stepped forward, her combat experience suddenly relevant in ways she had never expected. On Earth, when we face an enemy we can't match directly, we change the rules of engagement. We don't fight their strengths, we attack their weaknesses. Captain Cole was beginning to understand why they had been summoned. You didn't bring us here to fight 50,000 ships with one crew. You brought us here to teach you how to think differently about warfare. The alien leaders exchanged glances through their compound eyes. This was exactly what they had hoped for, but hearing it confirmed was both encouraging and terrifying. Your records indicate that human military doctrine includes concepts that we find disturbing, Council Prime Leith Nal said as she entered the chamber. Acceptable losses, strategic sacrifices, asymmetric warfare tactics. Sometimes you have to make hard choices to save lives in the long run, Captain Cole replied. It's not pretty, but it's better than letting everyone die because you won't compromise your principles. Dr. Turner was still studying the Vorthek data when he made a discovery that changed everything. Captain, look at this. These consumption patterns aren't random. They're targeting specific types of biological matter. They're not just expanding, they're evolving. The revelation hung in the air like a death sentence. The Vorthek weren't just consuming worlds for resources. They were using the genetic material of conquered species to improve themselves. Every victory made them more dangerous than before. How long do we have? Captain Cole asked. 6 months. Perhaps less, before they reach our core worlds. Admiral Kethvar replied. The human crew looked at each other, understanding the weight of what was being asked of them. They were supposed to find a way to defeat an enemy that had conquered half a galaxy, using resources and allies they barely understood. But they were also the descendants of persistence hunters who had chased mammoths across frozen plains and survived ice ages through sheer stubborn determination. If anyone could find a way to turn a hopeless situation into victory, it would be them. All right, Captain Cole said finally. Show us everything you know about these Vorthek. Every battle recording, every technical specification, every piece of intelligence you've gathered. If we're going to do this, we need to understand exactly what we're up against. 2 weeks had passed since the summoning, and the war room aboard the Zephyrian command station had become a place where two very different ways of thinking clashed daily. Captain Cole stood before the massive holographic display of the galaxy, watching red zones spread like a disease across the spiral arms. Each day brought news of more worlds falling to the Vorthek advance. Dr. Turner had barely slept during those 2 weeks. He spent his days in the alien laboratory, cutting apart samples of Vorthek tissue that had been recovered from destroyed ships. What he found made him more worried with each discovery. These things aren't just alive, he explained to the assembled group of humans and aliens. They're like a weaponized ecosystem. Every part of their ships, every weapon, every tool is a living organism that's been bred for a specific purpose. He activated a microscope display that showed the cellular structure of Vorthek biomaterial. The cells were unlike anything in Earth's biology textbooks. They could change their function based on chemical signals, turning from armor plating to energy conduits to weapon systems as needed. The scary part is how they solve the resource problem, Dr. Turner continued. These cells can digest almost any organic or metallic compound. As long as they keep feeding, they keep growing stronger. Chief Bennett had been working alongside Zephyrian engineers, trying to understand how the enemy ships functioned. Her human perspective on mechanical systems was proving valuable in ways the aliens hadn't expected. Their ships don't use fuel in any way we understand, she reported. The organic components digest matter directly, metal, organic compounds, even asteroids. It's like each ship is a giant stomach that flies through space. Commander Vex Moore brought up tactical displays showing recent Vorthek movements. They've consumed 3 more systems in the past week. The pattern remains consistent. They always target the highest population centers first, avoiding any areas with natural hazards. Lieutenant Commander Morrison had taken charge of analyzing enemy battle tactics. He spent hours reviewing combat recordings from fallen civilizations, looking for patterns that others had missed. Every species that fought them made the same mistake, he said, pointing to the tactical displays. They tried to match the Vorthek's numbers, fight them fleet to fleet. But look at these movement patterns. They're completely predictable. The battle recordings showed Vorthek fleets moving in perfect formation, never deviating from their planned routes, never adapting to unexpected situations. They were efficient but inflexible. It's like fighting a computer program, Morrison continued. They have responses for every conventional military tactic, but they can't handle anything they haven't seen before. Sergeant Valdez had been studying the recordings with the eye of someone who had fought in ground combat. Sir, there's something else. Look at how they board enemy ships. They use the same entry points every time, the same movement patterns. They're not thinking, they're following programming. Dr. Turner pulled up biological scans of Vorthek soldiers captured during previous battles. That makes sense given their physiology. Individual Vorthek don't have independent brains like we do. They're more like extensions of a central consciousness. Admiral, Kethvar studied the human analysis with growing interest. You speak of fighting them differently, but what alternatives exist? We cannot match their numbers, and our technology is only marginally superior. Captain Cole had been thinking about this problem for days. His military training had taught him that when facing a superior enemy, you had to change the battlefield. To your advantage. On Earth, we have a saying, if you can't win a fair fight, don't fight fair. The Vorthek expect their enemies to behave predictably. Every species they've fought has tried to protect every world, hold every position. He gestured to the star map, highlighting systems that the Vorthek had avoided. But look at these areas they won't enter. High radiation zones, unstable stellar regions, areas with dangerous space phenomena. Commander Vex Moore activated detailed scans of those regions. These systems contain pulsars, neutron stars, regions with intense gamma radiation. No civilized species would establish colonies in such dangerous areas. Exactly, Dr. Turner said, understanding where the captain was going. The Vorthek are biological entities. Intense radiation would disrupt their cellular processes, make it impossible for them to maintain cohesion. Chief Bennett was already running calculations on her portable computer. If we could force them to fight in high radiation environments, their organic ships would literally fall apart. But how do we make them go where they don't want to go? Sergeant Valdez had been studying the enemy consumption patterns when she noticed something important. Ma'am, look at this data. The Vorthek don't just eat randomly. They're targeting specific types of genetic material. She brought up displays showing the biological profiles of consumed worlds. They're not just expanding for territory. They're hunting for specific genes, specific evolutionary adaptations. Every world they consume makes them more dangerous. The revelation changed everything. The Vorthek weren't just a hive mind trying to expand, they were a hive mind trying to evolve. They were using the genetic diversity of conquered species to improve themselves. That's why they always go for the high population worlds first, Morrison realized. More people means more genetic material to harvest. They're not just feeding, they're shopping. Dr. Turner studied the genetic profiles with growing alarm. If they keep this up, they'll eventually acquire the best survival traits from every species in the galaxy. They could become virtually unstoppable. But Captain Cole saw an opportunity where others saw only horror. If they're hunting for specific genetic material, then we can use that against them. We can bait them with targets they can't resist. Admiral Kethvar's compound eyes reflected confusion. You would sacrifice innocent populations to lure the enemy into a trap? Not sacrifice, Cole corrected. Redirect, we give them what they want, but on our terms, in locations where we have the advantage. Chief Bennett understood immediately. Decoy targets in high radiation zones. Make them choose between easy prey and genetic material they need for evolution. The alien officers looked uncomfortable with the concept. Zephyrian military doctrine had always emphasized protecting civilian populations above all else. The idea of using them as bait violated every principle they held sacred. This strategy requires us to think like predators rather than protectors, Council Prime Lyeth Nal observed as she entered the war room. It is not how civilized beings conduct warfare. Civilized beings are going extinct, Sergeant Valdez replied bluntly. The Vorthek don't care about your principles. They care about food and genetic material. Morrison had been working on tactical simulations based on the new strategy. The math actually works. if we can force them to fight in high radiation environments. Their fleet effectiveness drops by at least 60%. Their organic components start breaking down within hours. Dr. Turner brought up his latest biological analysis. I've been studying samples from their command organisms. The radiation doesn't just damage them, it disrupts their communication with the hive mind. Individual ships start acting independently, making mistakes. The implications were staggering. For the first time since the war began, they had found a weakness in the seemingly invincible enemy. But exploiting that weakness would require tactics that made their alien allies deeply uncomfortable. There's something else, Dr. Turner added quietly. I've been analyzing the progression of their genetic acquisitions. If my calculations are correct, they're close to a breakthrough that would make them immune to radiation damage. The room fell silent. Their window of opportunity was closing fast. How long do we have? Captain Cole asked. Based on their current consumption rate and the genetic complexity of recent targets, I estimate 6 to 8 weeks before they acquire sufficient radiation resistance. Admiral Kethvar studied the tactical projections with the weight of command heavy on his shoulders. If we attempt this strategy and fail, we will have sacrificed everything for nothing. If we don't attempt it, we lose anyway, Cole replied. At least this way we have a chance. The debate continued for hours, but the mathematics were undeniable. Conventional warfare had failed every species that attempted it. Only by abandoning conventional thinking did they have any hope of survival. In the end, it was Commander Vex Moore who asked the question that settled the matter. What would these humans do if their own world faced this threat? Captain Cole's answer was simple and brutal: whatever it takes to win. The alliance between human tactical thinking and Zephyrian technology began to take shape that day. It would require both species to become something they had never been before: predators, willing to sacrifice principles for survival. The galaxy was about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one that refuses to play by the rules. 3 months after the summoning, the combined human-Zephyrian fleet hung in the darkness near the Kepler Nebula. The nebula was a dangerous place where few ships dared to travel. Radiation from dying stars filled the space with deadly energy that could kill most living things in minutes. It was exactly the kind of place the Vorthok avoided. Captain Cole stood on the bridge of the command ship, watching as Chief Bennett's engineering teams made final changes to their weapons. The plan they had developed was insane by any normal military standard. Instead of trying to match the enemy's strength, they were going to turn that strength into a weakness. Final systems check complete, Bennett reported over the communication system. The radiation amplifiers are in position throughout the nebula. When we activate them, this whole region is going to become a death trap. The amplifiers were a combination of human engineering and Zephyrian technology. They would take the natural radiation in the nebula and focus it into beams that could cut through space like invisible swords. Any organic material caught in those beams would be destroyed in seconds. Dr. Turner monitored the biological weapons from the science bay. He had spent weeks creating something that had never existed before: modified Earth bacteria designed to attack Vorthok's cellular structure. The bacterial cultures are stable, he reported to Captain Cole. Once we introduce them into their bioships, the infection should spread through their organic systems within hours. The bacteria will literally eat their ships from the inside. The biological weapon made many of the Zephyrian officers uncomfortable. Using living organisms as weapons violated their understanding of proper warfare. But as Admiral Kethvar had learned, human warfare operated by different rules. Sergeant Valdez commanded a strike team made up of volunteers from both species. Their job was the most dangerous part of the plan. They had to get close enough to Vorthok command ships to plant the biological weapons directly into their systems. Strike teams are ready, she reported. We've got portable cloaking devices courtesy of our alien friends. and enough firepower to punch through their hull armor. The hard part is going to be staying alive long enough to plant the bugs. The cloaking devices were Zephyrian technology that had been modified by human engineers. Originally designed for scientific observation, they had been weaponized to allow small teams to board enemy ships without being detected. Lieutenant Commander Morrison coordinated the fleet movements from the tactical center. The bait was already in position, a refugee transport filled with genetic samples from dozens of different species. To the Vorthek, it would look like the perfect target. Long-range sensors show the Vorthek fleet approaching, Commander Vex Moore announced from her station. Estimated arrival in 90 minutes. Fleet composition matches our predictions. They're sending a harvester group. The approaching fleet consisted of over 200 Vorthak vessels. Each ship was a living nightmare of organic and mechanical components, pulsing with veins that carried unknown fluids through their hulls. They moved through space like a school of predatory fish, perfectly coordinated and utterly deadly. Admiral Kethvar studied the tactical displays with nervous energy. 200 ships against our 50. Even with our environmental advantages, the numbers are not encouraging. Numbers don't matter if we can make them fight stupid, Captain Cole replied. The Vorthek have never lost a battle because they've never faced an enemy willing to fight dirty. The refugee transport began broadcasting distress signals on all frequencies as it limped toward the nebula's edge. The ship appeared to be damaged and defenseless, carrying valuable genetic cargo that the Vorthek couldn't resist. Dr. Turner watched the biological scanners as the enemy fleet drew closer. They're taking the bait. Sensor readings show increased activity in their harvester ships. They think they found an easy meal. The Vorthak fleet spread into their standard hunting formation as they pursued the refugee ship. They had used the same tactics for so long that they couldn't imagine any other approach. Their perfect coordination was about to become their greatest weakness. All ships, prepare for Operation Persistence Hunt, Captain Cole announced over the fleet communication system. Remember, we're not trying to fight them head-to-head. We're here to teach them that being the strongest predator doesn't matter if you're hunting in the wrong place. The refugee ship crossed into the nebula's outer edge, broadcasting increasingly desperate pleas for help. The Vorthek fleet followed without hesitation, their sensors focused on the genetic treasure they believed was within their grasp. What they didn't expect was that the humans had no intention of running away. As the lead Vorthak ships entered the radiation field, Chief Bennett activated the amplifiers. Energy that had been building in the nebula for millions of years suddenly focused into deadly beams. The natural radiation became a weapon that could slice through space itself. The first wave Vorthak ships ran directly into the radiation beams. Their organic hulls began to break down immediately. The living components that gave them their strength started dying as cellular damage spread through their systems. But the real surprise came when Sergeant Valdez's strike teams activated their cloaking devices and began boarding the larger command vessels. The Vorthek had never encountered an enemy willing to fight them inside their own ships. Strike Team Alpha, moving to primary target, Valdez reported as her team materialized inside a Vorthek command ship. The interior was like something from a nightmare, walls that pulsed with organic life, floors that felt soft and warm under their boots. The Vorthek crew reacted slowly to the invasion. Their hive mind had no experience with close-quarters combat against independent thinkers. While they tried to coordinate a response, the human and Zephyrian soldiers were already planting Dr. Turner's biological weapons throughout the ship. Charges placed, Valdez reported. The bacteria should spread through their organic systems within the hour. Other strike teams reported similar success throughout the Vorthak fleet. The enemy's perfect coordination worked against them when faced with multiple simultaneous boarding actions. They couldn't adapt fast enough to deal with threats they had never imagined. Dr. Turner monitored the bacterial spread from his science station. Biological weapon deployment successful. I'm reading system failures throughout their fleet as the bacteria consume their organic components. The modified Earth bacteria spread through the Vorthik ships like wildfire. The alien organisms had no natural defenses against terrestrial microbes that had been specifically designed to attack their cellular structure. For the first time in recorded galactic history, Vorthik ships began falling apart from the inside. Their organic weapons stopped working. Their navigation systems failed. Their communication with the hive mind was severed as the bacteria destroyed the neural pathways that connected them to the collective consciousness that Captain Cole watched. The tactical display as red icons representing enemy ships began winking out one by one. Target their command ships while they're confused. Don't give them time to adapt. The Zephyrian fleet opened fire with weapons that had been modified based on human tactical doctrine. Instead of trying to destroy the Vorthik ships with overwhelming force, they targeted specific systems designed to cause maximum confusion. Lieutenant Commander Morrison coordinated the attack patterns. Focus fire on their communication arrays. Separate the individual ships from the hive mind. Make them think for themselves. The strategy worked better than anyone had dared hope. Vorthik ships that had fought with perfect coordination for centuries suddenly found themselves operating independently. Without the guiding intelligence of the hive mind, they made mistakes that would have been impossible before. Admiral Kefvar watched in amazement as the supposedly invincible enemy fleet began to crumble. How is this possible? They have superior numbers and technology. Superior technology doesn't matter if you don't know how to use it creatively, Captain Cole replied. The Vorthik are perfect soldiers, but they're terrible warriors. They never learned to think outside their programming. The battle lasted only 47 minutes, but its effects would be felt across the entire galaxy. A Vorthik fleet that should have been unstoppable had been destroyed not through superior firepower, but through superior thinking. As the last enemy ship succumbed to bacterial infection and radiation damage, the combined fleet found itself looking at something that hadn't been seen in 3 years, empty space where a Vorthik fleet used to be. But even as they celebrated their victory, Dr. Turner was monitoring deep space communications. The bacterial infection was spreading beyond the battlefield, carried by Vorthik communication signals to other fleets across the galaxy. Captain, he reported with a mixture of triumph and concern, the infection is spreading through their entire network. We may have just won the war. The implications were staggering. If the bacteria continued to spread through the Vorthik collective, their entire species could be facing extinction within months. The hunters had become the hunted, and the galaxy's most dangerous predators had just learned what it felt like to be prey. 6 months after the Battle of Kepler Nebula, Captain Cole stood in the rebuilt council chambers on Zephyr Prime. Through the crystal windows, he could see construction crews working to repair the damage from the war. But inside the chamber, a different kind of battle was taking place. Representatives from dozens of species had gathered for what they called a war crimes tribunal. The victory over the Vorthik had saved the galaxy, but the methods used had shocked many civilizations. The clean, honorable warfare they were used to had been replaced by something much darker. Dr. Turner presented his final report to the assembled delegates. His voice was tired from months of explaining the same terrible facts over and over again. The biological weapons we created were completely effective. The modified bacteria spread through the Vorthik communication network faster than we had predicted. He activated a holographic display showing the galaxy 6 months ago, covered in red zones where the Vorthik had controlled territory. Then the display updated to show the current situation. Almost all of the red zones were gone. Conservative estimates place Vorthik fleet losses at 97%. The remaining ships appear to be isolated units that have lost contact with the hive mind. They pose no significant threat to galactic civilization. The Aquilian ambassador raised one of his tentacled arms in protest. Dr. Turner, you speak of victory as if it justifies the horror of what you have done. The use of biological weapons violates every principle of civilized warfare that has existed for thousands of years. The ambassador's words carried the weight of moral authority. The Aquilians were known throughout the galaxy for their peaceful nature and commitment to ethical conduct. They had been among the first to condemn the human tactics. You deliberately created a plague designed to destroy an entire species, the ambassador continued. How is this different from what the Vorthik themselves were doing? Sergeant Valdez, still bearing the scars from her boarding missions, stood to respond. Her face showed the hard lines that came from making difficult decisions under fire. The difference is that we had a choice. The Vorthik were going to kill everyone in the galaxy. We stopped them by becoming like them, accused the Kron representative. The Kron were a warrior species that prided themselves on honorable combat. You fought without honor, without mercy, without regard for the rules of war. Chief Bennett had spent months helping to rebuild the infrastructure of liberated worlds. Her engineering expertise had been crucial to the reconstruction efforts, but even she struggled with the moral weight of what they had done. The question isn't whether we were right or wrong, she said quietly. The question is whether we could have saved more lives by doing things differently. I've been to the worlds the Vorthik attacked. I've seen what they left behind. Nothing. Not even bacteria in the soil. Lieutenant Commander Morrison presented the tactical analysis that military academies across the galaxy would study for generations. Every species that fought the Vorthik before us tried to match their strength with strength, honor against hunger, principle against predation. All of them lost. The holographic displays showed battle after battle where conventional forces had been overwhelmed by Vorthik tactics. Millions of ships destroyed, billions of lives lost, entire civilizations consumed. We didn't fight them on their terms, Morrison continued. We changed the rules of engagement. We used their strengths against them. It wasn't pretty, but it worked. Admiral Kethvar had been promoted to Supreme Commander of the Allied forces after the victory. The weight of command had aged him visibly, his once bright carapace now dulled by stress and responsibility. The humans showed us that there is a difference between being civilized and being naive, he said to the assembly. We had spent so long believing in the nobility of our cause that we forgot the practical requirements of survival. But not everyone was convinced. The hegemony representative, speaking for a coalition of smaller species, raised the question that haunted everyone present. If we accept these methods as necessary, what prevents future conflicts from becoming genocidal by default? You have taught the galaxy that biological warfare is acceptable when the stakes are high enough. Council Prime Lyeth now bearing the title of Galactic Coordinator, addressed this concern directly. The humans have also taught us that sometimes, to preserve what we value most, we must be willing to become what we fear. The question is not whether their methods were moral, but whether the alternative was acceptable. Dr. Turner had been monitoring the long-term effects of the bacterial weapon for months. His latest findings added another layer of complexity to the moral debate. The bacteria we created has evolved since its initial deployment. It's no longer specifically targeting Vorthik biology. Current projections suggest it could affect other organic-based technologies within 50 years. The revelation sent a ripple of concern through the assembly. The weapon that had saved them from the Vorthik might eventually threaten other species that used biological components in their technology. So you've replaced one threat with another, the Aquilian ambassador said with obvious dismay. A slow-acting plague that could eventually affect us all. We've bought time, Captain Cole replied firmly. 50 years to develop countermeasures, to find solutions, to prepare for whatever comes next. That's 50 years our children will have that they wouldn't have had if the Vorthik had won. The debate continued for weeks, but the practical reality was undeniable. The galaxy had been saved, but the cost had been higher than anyone had anticipated. The methods used to achieve victory had fundamentally changed how warfare would be conducted in the future. Sergeant Valdez spoke for many when she addressed the tribunal's final session. "You want to judge us for the choices we made. Fine, but remember that we made those choices so you could be here to judge us. The Vorthek wouldn't have given you that luxury." The final judgment came from an unexpected source. Siltith, the ancient keeper of archives who had first suggested summoning the humans, spoke with the authority of someone who had lived through multiple galactic crises. "Every generation believes it can fight its wars with clean hands and pure hearts," she said slowly. "Every generation learns that survival sometimes requires compromise. The humans did not teach us to be cruel, they taught us to be realistic." The tribunal's final verdict was as complex as the situation itself. The human tactics were officially condemned as violations of galactic warfare conventions, but they were also officially recognized as necessary for species survival under extreme circumstances. A new category of military doctrine was created: extinction protocols that could only be activated when facing threats to galactic civilization itself. The humans became the guardians of these protocols, trusted with weapons and strategies too dangerous for most species to possess. Captain Cole returned to Earth aboard the Defiance 6 months after the tribunal concluded. As he looked out at the stars, he carried with him the gratitude of a galaxy and the burden of decisions that would haunt him for the rest of his life. The galaxy was safe, but it was no longer innocent. The clean lines between right and wrong had been blurred by necessity. Future generations would have to live with the knowledge that their survival had come at the cost of absolute moral certainty. In the end, the Zephyrians had gotten exactly what they asked for when they made their desperate summoning. They had called upon the most dangerous species they could find, and that species had delivered victory through methods that redefined warfare itself. The question that remained was whether the cure had been worth the cost. Time would tell if they had summoned saviors or simply replaced one existential threat with the knowledge of how to create others. But for now, children played safely on. 1,000 worlds, scientists pursued knowledge without fear of consumption, and artists created beauty that would not be devoured by an hungry hive mind. The stars burned bright and free, and perhaps that was enough. The galaxy had learned that sometimes the most dangerous choice is also the only one that leads to survival. In the deep archives of Zephyr Prime, Siltith made a final entry in the record of the war. "We summoned monsters to fight monsters and discovered that the line between them is thinner than we ever imagined. May future generations never need to learn this lesson for themselves." The humans had proven themselves as requested. They were indeed the most dangerous species in known space. But they had also proven something else, that sometimes the most dangerous option is the only one that works.